Good evening, folks. You're listening into the Venomous Fringe. I'm Chris, and join me this evening as Ryan and I sit down with Devin Fenner from the Cryptid Diaries podcast. This podcast is pretty interesting. It's a new and upcoming podcast by this young individual, much like ourselves, and we're going to sit down and speak with him on his opinion when it comes to cryptids such as Bigfoot, Dogman, Goatman, and other mysterious creatures of the unknown. We'll see you guys after the show. Enjoy. Joining us right now on the Venomous Fringe, we're sitting down with Devin Fenner from the Cryptid Diaries podcast. Devin, good evening. How you doing tonight, bud?
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here, man. And, of course, for a fellow guy from upstate in the tri-state area, the east coast of the U.S., more hats off to you, especially coming from New York, man.
Oh, yeah. It's a haul up here, for sure.
Busy intersection. Always busy, especially up in the city, so it must be a killer.
It never stops up here, never stops.
Well, also, too, in the terms of stuff that never stops, we talk about cryptids and cryptozoology, and the million-dollar question, as always for every researcher, is where it all begins. So, Devin, what started your interest in cryptozoology? Where did it begin?
Probably a very, very young age. I grew up camping up in the Adirondack Mountains every summer or spring with my family. We did a lot of hiking, just a lot of backwoods stuff. I'd always be out exploring, doing my thing. Just kind of, I've always been a nature guy. Wildlife photography was a big thing for me. And I was always interested in that kind of stuff. Like I'd read library books at school on them. I'd see all these TV shows. I'd seen the Patterson-Gimlin film so many times I couldn't even count. And just my fascination just kind of kept getting more and more and more, just learning more. Just my fascination just became bigger and bigger and bigger. And I started learning about different cryptids other than Sasquatch, and it's kind of became a lifelong interest, really.
I think it's interesting when you are at like the library, whether you're at a young age or even at an elementary school or library, and you pick up a book on cryptids or Bigfoot. I picked up one on Jersey Devil. That's what got my whole interest started on cryptids.
That's a good one.
But yeah, going into that, have you ever personally had a cryptid encounter?
I definitely haven't had a face-to-face like personal encounter. I've seen some things out in the woods that like maybe out of the ordinary that could possibly be related to it, but I definitely can't say for sure. But I definitely have seen some things that I think personally that may be related in with them.
And what do you mean?
It you've seen though?
Oof, my parents have a camp, and I'm always every time we were up there, I'd always be out in the woods. I'd be gone. And I'd see like push down like the tree structures, like you've seen like the trees just bent down in strange formations. I feel like I've seen some kind of like imprint in the ground, but I couldn't really make out if it was a footprint. Like it looked like there was a couple like kind of in a line, but I didn't want to chalk it up to, oh, that could possibly be, because I was maybe 13 or 14 years old when that happened. But
Young to really know.
exactly, I didn't want to make like a judgment call in there, and then I ask everybody, and then it's like, oh no, that's just this.
Mm-hmm.
I kept that one to myself. I mean, I've heard some strange like calls, but can never really like pinpoint where they were coming from or what kind of animal could be making them. So that's kind of like where my interest kind of was even going farther, because like I'm just seeing all these random things and can't really think of what kind of logical animal could make those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like where it all adds up for me and kind of makes me think more and more.
From memory that best describes it, can you kind of get a good description on what the sounds or the calls sounded like? Did it sound anything that sounded a bit more vicious-like or intimidating?
It was definitely a very out in the distance type thing, but you can just hear it, just like it kind of like just echoes. And I'd be out in the woods till dark, and it would get pretty creepy. You'd kind of get the the chills a little bit. I'd always be looking like kind of behind me, around me, like just really on edge about my surroundings. I've definitely had like the feeling like you've been like somebody's watching you type feeling,
Oh yeah,
and
that's common.
it gives you the willies a little bit, and it's like, okay, I need to head back to camp now. It's like, all right, I'm out here by myself. I probably shouldn't be out here right now, but let's just get there as quick as we can.
Did you ever get that feeling of absolute dread though that so many people report?
A little bit, honestly. Like I'm just kind of like my heart just kind of like starts skipping a beat a little bit. Like, all right, it's like something's getting a little intense here, but I can't see what it is, and then like that just makes the feeling worse. And it's
Absolutely.
just like, all right, I need to hurry it on out of here. Just kind of start getting along here quicker.
Mhm.
But luckily, I've never had any really bad experiences, which is good. But I've definitely had some that could, like I said, probably, let's say the word, definitely chalk up to probably being related to something being, you know, I could just never pinpoint what it could be though. And that was the creepier part for me, is that not knowing what was possibly looking at me, what was out there with me, like not being able to see. And that makes it just even more creepier.
Yeah, that's the part that's hard to deal with. Is not
Exactly. It's like it's always in the back of your mind, like, all right, is something following me? Is there somebody out here? Is there something out here? Like, what is out here?
yeah, you imagine the worst. It's just human nature.
Exactly. Like, is
Well,
there
yeah,
somebody out here that wants to possibly harm me, or is there an animal out here that can be harmful to myself? Like, like it's just the anxiety of it just kind of starts kicking in.
oh,
But
for
then
sure.
once I'm like out of the woods, like it goes, like it just disappears. Like
Hmm.
as soon as I hit like the main road, it's like the feeling's just gone, which is odd to me.
Yeah, it is kind of strange, isn't it?
Like it's just so weird how fast it comes upon you, but then how fast it leaves. It just like it makes you feel like something's there and it doesn't want you there. And the minute you're out of that area, it's dead silent.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a primordial thing with humans, man. It's ingrained in our
Exactly.
DNA.
We're always intimidated by the woods because we know that there are things in the woods that can easily take us out as human beings. And then when we get to a safe zone, like if we're in a town, and it could be a small town or it can be just a regular sized town, when we're near more people where we know wildlife will not enter, we feel more relaxed because we're with people. So I've always interpreted like that. But I could tell you one thing: I can walk into a park or I can go in a trail, and I could be maybe 20 minutes into this trail, and I can tell you that I always feel being watched because I do know and feel that there's something there. It may not be necessarily a cryptid, but it could be a regular animal. I've often run across deer. I've went for morning walks and jogs into small trails where I've seen deer, and it's freaked me out. So it's that anxiety that you get.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I said, like growing up, like I said, I was always up in the Adirondacks camping, like Old Forage area, Lake George. I've even been through Whitehall a few times, but I never really knew the stories about Whitehall before until I started kind of learning more about the subject. And I always thought to my head, I was like, I've been through there and I didn't even know these things. And it's just like it amazes me because it's so close to where I am. And it just kind of made the fascination like, oh, maybe these things could be around where I live. Like you can, it's just always that in the back of my mind, like I could be just hiking out in the woods and randomly come upon one of these things one day, and it would just be one of those crazy moments.
Would you say you're somebody that is pro kill or anti kill when it comes to cryptid?
Mm, that one always gets me because if it is an undiscovered species, yes, there's the only way to really come about that is to possibly have a body of a specimen. But my thing is how, like, with the possible intelligence of these creatures, it's just I feel like they have a mindset like us. Like they are not dumb at all. Like they have a very smart mindset, and they know. I believe they know like what weapons are and everything. And I just feel like doing that would make things a little bit worse. They would make them fear us more or angered by humans, and that could possibly cause a fatality, possibly. But I mean, in a scientific point, I think me personally, I wouldn't kill, but in order for science to possibly answer some of these questions, I think a body of a specimen would help a lot, or at least some sort of DNA or evidence like that. It would help a lot.
I don't think we need a body though. It's not detrimental. I think if we actually had some clean sources of DNA, we could still keep them alive without really needing that.
Exactly, like just like a piece of fur, flesh, or even bones.
Well, there's a big risk, man. I mean, if we were to kill them, we don't know how many are left.
Exactly, like you don't know how many there are in the country, in the world. I mean, if people go out killing these things, you're just gonna. What if there's less than a couple thousand? Like, you could just wipe them out completely, and we won't have any answers.
Yeah, it comes down to a morality call, really, man. I mean, it's something a lot of people like to ignore. But
Exactly.
Think, does that one dog man you see, does it have pups maybe or whatever? Are you depriving the pups if you kill her?
Exactly. Like, are you like depriving like a young of a parent?
Exactly.
That relies on them for food and everything and protection, and then you're just putting them out in danger, and then you're killing a species slowly.
Right.
And that's no way good in any way, really. It's not helping anything.
No, it's worsening matters, actually.
Exactly. It makes the process of discovering these animals more and more difficult. And it's just it's a difficult situation overall, no doubt. It's very difficult, but I think eventually somebody will come upon something that could maybe give us a big answer to this mystery.
Yeah, it does drive into that type of idea because everybody wants to see some sort of proof and evidence that will say, okay, this does exist. Tell skeptics to stop being skeptical, but I don't even think even with the best definitive footage could be enough to give a good conclusion on what a Bigfoot is. And we've argued about this for years, starting with the Patterson Gimlin film. And how much of that film, Devin, do you really know? Let me ask you that first question.
I've heard the story a lot. I mean, I've seen the video numerous times. I've heard so many stories with like Bob Gimlin describing it, and I mean, I believe that they did and truly in fact see something that day. I believe that it'd be very tough in that day in life to kind of manifest something fake like that. Like, I mean, nowadays with like CGI and movie props, like, yeah, I mean, people could do it, but back in the 60s, it was hard to do those things. And with like the remastered or the re-edited video of it that you can actually see like an HD part of it, you can see muscle movements in the animal, and it's hard to fake those things in a costume. Like, how do you fake muscles movements? And it's just it's hard for me not to believe it. But I mean, a lot of people, of course, they're gonna have their opinions. But me personally, I do believe they did see something that day that truly is something out of this world, no doubt.
Yeah, it's always a controversy. To expand upon Chris's question, though, what's your beliefs pertaining to the Bluff Creek massacre? Do you think Patterson and Gimlin had a hand in killing the Bigfoot?
Oof. Honestly, with the way Mr. Gimlin is, I don't feel like he might have. I don't think so. I can't say the same for Mr. Patterson because he passed away back in the early 70s.
I believe so. Yeah,
72.
We didn't really get to hear much of what he had to say, but I mean, I don't think that Mr. Gimlin seemed like a guy that would kind of do that, just start going after him. Really, he was more curious on just finding out what these things really were. Really, just kind of getting an answer for what they saw that day.
Yeah, it's not something I believe in either. I think Chris shares the same opinion I do.
He just seems like a guy that would not be like, oh, let's just go shoot up as many of these things as we can, you know.
Right.
Like he takes it from like a scientific standpoint. Like what if we have a undiscovered species right here in America, like in our country? Like it could be a scientific discovery of a lifetime. And that was 50 plus years ago. I mean, it was 1967. That was the year my father was born.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny
So
how
it's just it's crazy.
yeah, so many of us were influenced by that film, and none of us were really born yet.
Exactly. I wasn't even a thought yet.
Yeah, we would have thought. Here we are, so entangled in that film.
But now we're kind of the next generation of those guys, and it's fun though. It's fun.
It can be, yeah. Sometimes it can be a drag, but
Yeah, it can be complicated sometimes for sure. But for the most part, it is fun. You meet a lot of nice people, a lot of great group of guys. Like all the groups I've been in, I've talked to a bunch of great guys. Some that I would call friends. They're great guys, no doubt. Like I have a great deal of respect for everybody.
then you meet the guys like Chris and I and just go, ugh.
I have a great respect for you guys too, actually, very much.
Oh, well, thank you.
Very
Thank you.
so.
Yeah,
It's a fun community.
it is, and that's what makes cryptozoology so thrilling, because you can talk about subjects that you can't even have a normal conversation with people with.
Exactly.
One thing, though, about cryptozoology that I think is different now compared to back then is the way we take things, whether it's evidence or whether we take it through TV and how they present it. But do you think that cryptozoology is being taught properly in the right direction today compared to how it was taught many years ago, or do you think it's the total opposite?
I think with the amount of investigators that we have out in the field today who actually bring back definitive evidence, I think those guys help a lot in making cryptozoology a lot more serious, like in the thought. Like it kind of gives people an actual perspective of, oh, maybe there is something out there because they're finding footprint casts, tree structures, just all those types of things that they kind of associate with those beings. And it kind of opens people's eyes up a little bit. Like every day, like when I see somebody post a photo of something they've seen, like I always look at it and I'm fascinated because it just makes me think in my head, they may have seen something. And that could be a once in a lifetime experience.
Exactly, and I think that's kind of why when we do research and connect with others, we try to find that definitive conclusion or draw notes. I always believe in connecting and bonding with other researchers, whether it's getting along to build a formatted grid. I'm not about, of course, diving into anything negative. I just want to find answers as much as the next guy. So it is a project, but it's also a headache too, I think, when trying to draw a definitive answer, especially with opinions.
Exactly, because it's so complicated to get a definitive answer because nobody can really have one right now. So it's just very opinion based.
And I want to ask you this, and of course honesty is key here. What is your honest opinion on Encrypted? Do you believe we deal with flesh and blood, or are we dealing with something more than flesh and blood, perhaps supernatural?
With Sasquatch, I mostly would probably go towards, this could be a flesh and blood animal. I go towards that for sure. Because, I mean, just with all the evidence I've read, like the accounts I've listened to and stories I've heard, descriptions, and it makes me think, like, this may be just a flesh and blood animal that is just truly intelligent and just something that we've never seen before. But something like the Jersey Devil and those sorts, those to me sound a little bit more extraterrestrial, in my opinion. Like leaning towards those type of cryptids, I do believe those may have some sort of extraterrestrial being processes on them. But that's kind of where I stand with that.
Would you say the Mothman too would be more of a?
Extraterrestrial for sure.
I think Mothman was one of my biggest introductions to cryptozoology, and Mothman, though I'm not the full expert, I don't even think there is an expert on it, but as a researcher, what do you think it primarily is? Would you think it's something from a different dimension? Do you think it's an experiment gone awry? Do you think it could be something else?
I mean, you never know what kind of experiments they could have been doing back in the 50s and 60s with the government. I mean, it could have been something just gone wrong, or it really could be something from a different dimension or extraterrestrial, and it just could be something that is almost impossible to kind of really get an answer for versus like Sasquatch and everything like that. It's hard to get definitive evidence of Mothman. Like there's a lot more Sasquatch and Dogman and Jersey Devil like encounters and evidence and stories, but Mothman is a little bit different, so it's hard to really kind of get an idea of what it really could be. But that's what makes it more interesting.
What do you think of the whole omen aspect of the Mothman in terms of tragedy and events?
Oh, with what was the bridge collapsing in West Virginia?
Yeah.
There was one of them. Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about that too, and I've heard a lot of different opinions. And I mean, if it is something like extraterrestrial, I mean, maybe they do have some kind of power to do those things, or if it is from a different dimension, it has different powers, or it could just do whatever it please. And it was just kind of giving them a warning of, hey, I'm here and I can do these things. So I mean, it's just a massive mystery overall, really.
And do you think, too, it is all just a big mystery and array that could be exaggerated? Do you think maybe that it's just coincidental that these events happen and this creature happens to be there?
Honestly, I do find it a little strange that these things coincidentally happened around the same times that the sightings became more and more around the same area. So I do believe that they may have been connected in a way. I don't know how, but I do believe it could be something to do with each other. Yes.
Just want to add to that real quick, though. You know, supernatural is a blanket term that's easily misidentified. I think a lot of people, when they hear supernatural, they think ghost, demon, whatever,
Oh,
whatever.
absolutely.
But the thing is, though, we as humans got to remember that we often constitute anything supernatural as something that moves faster than we do. So if a Bigfoot moves faster than us or a Dogman moves faster than us, we automatically think supernatural, and that's not always the case, though.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%.
As a researcher, I think, too, when we grow into this field of getting to know what to do, it also comes with a great eye for trying to draw some sort of ground for what you want to research. Do you take your research, do you compare your notes with others, or do you do your own research by the book? You build it on the foreground of hearing other accounts, and you just draw just side notes like any other researcher does. How do you go about your research?
I tend to I follow a lot of like the New York Bigfoot Society. I follow a lot of them because around my area, I like to hear of a lot of accounts of where areas I've been to or know, because it kind of gives me a better idea of where I can even look. Say if like if I take a trip up there, or if me and my family are up there, and I can just take a ride and kind of check out the area. And it kind of gives me a better perspective of where to look and when to look and what to look for. But I also like to to look for like myself and like kind of see if I could see some things that some people may not have seen, or things like people not have heard of. And even Western New York. I used to live out in Western New York for a couple of years, and there was a lot going on out there. And it's just around this state, it's pretty crazy to think that there is a lot more than they say there is up here.
Yeah, I have to agree, especially because New York also has a lot of land and a lot of forest. So, of course, for where you're at and located, it definitely does add on to that effect. Which could also explain to the fear of anxiety, I guess, when you're, of course, going out in the woods and you're just all surrounded by it. Nearest town is like about maybe 10 to 15 miles away. So, but on top of that, going back into some of the cryptid talk, probably another thing that's been popped up lately in our research, and this is also something that's been noticeable when we watch videos. Do you feel that there has come some sort of exaggeration in terms of what people are seeing? For example, you hear these reports of people who talk about Foxman or Gator Man. You hear those type of names, and while
Yeah.
they sound comical, do you think that this may be some sort of exaggeration? Do you think maybe that these are misidentified Bigfoot's, dogmen, or perhaps maybe lizardmen to an extent, or something totally else when there's reports being put out?
Yeah, I do have some skepticism with certain ones like that, like Lizard Man, Alligator Man, Fox. It's just, it's harder for me to kind of believe those ones because it's mostly stories. You don't really hear a lot of, you don't see like a lot of evidence or a lot of those type of things. So it's just, I'm a guy that like, I like to see the evidence. Like, I'm not a skeptic, but I also like seeing evidence and like photos or recordings, stuff like that. And it makes me kind of, it makes a picture in my head more easier to kind of think about what it could be. But I mean, I've heard plenty of stories of like the reptile man down in the south and mutant alligators and things like that, crazy things like that. I've heard so much of that throughout the years. But I mean, I never could say you never know. There very well could be these things, which would be even more interesting to find out, really. I'd be all for learning about those too.
Well, an interesting side note pertaining to the lizard man, down in the Carolinas, they actually did discover the remains, the fossil remains of a 9 foot tall bipedal crocodile. So
Did
that
they
could,
really?
yeah, it could possibly be one of those that has somehow survived extinction or, evolved.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really makes you think a lot about that.
Oh wow. I never heard of that.
Yeah, I think they call it the pterosaur or something along those lines, but they
I'll have to do some little research on that because that sounds fascinating. Actually,
very much so.
well, that would change the whole perspective really right there.
Yeah, it kind of changes the dynamics a little bit.
Because I mean, like, what if like some of these animals could have survived from
Uh-huh.
millions of years ago,
It would
or it
explain
could
a lot.
your dinosaur type creature really?
Yeah, it could very well be.
And that's the fascinating thing, really, because you never know. I mean, these things could be roaming the world right now, and we wouldn't even know
Oh yeah, I
unless
mean
we were looking.
one of the most famous cryptids is a dinosaur, the Mokulimembe.
Exactly, 100%. And that's just what's fascinating about it.
Hmm.
Because I mean, like, think about it: crocodiles, alligators, some turtles, lizards, like all like reptilian species, like they have dinosaur characteristics. They
As
survived and have evolved
yeah,
over millions of years. Like what makes us say that some of these animals didn't evolve over time and turn into like these things that we now know today as some cryptids,
oh,
and
it's
they
fairly
could be
possible.
possibly something that lived millions of years ago that just evolved into something
Well, that's the
completely different.
interesting thing too. If you want to look at it the scientific way, birds are probably the closest things we have to dinosaurs.
Exactly.
So when people say dinosaurs are gone, it's kind of like, well, not really. They're not. They're just evolved.
And there is a whole array of birds around. It's just they come in so many different shapes, colors, sizes, like eagles and vultures. They're massive.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Like
mean,
you never know,
most,
and what their descendants could have been. They could
well,
have
the
been
Velociraptor. Look at that one. Yeah, the
exactly.
raptor. Yeah, it was a bird of prey.
And
The
I've heard some accounts of people saying that they've seen possible velociraptors,
I wouldn't
or
be surprised, honestly. I would not
like
be surprised.
South America, and just I mean I don't know how true that would be, but I mean I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I wouldn't discount it just yet.
I really wouldn't. It's just that's the fascinating thing and the curiosity. That's what people get their curiosity from. Because I mean, what if some of these creatures survived the last million years and evolved? Evolution, really.
Yeah. Or adaptation. Simple as that.
Exactly. There's a lot of theories that could go along with these things, and that's the fun part. Like, you can just think of so many theories, and you can kind of just pinpoint which ones make more sense and which ones don't, and then it gives you a better idea of what these things really could be.
Speaking of, let's go into a little bit of Sasquatch. What do you think a Sasquatch could be? Do you think it stems from Native American? Think it's something totally different? What are your thoughts?
I mean, the Native American thing, there's been stories throughout Native American history of giant creatures like this dating back hundreds of years, thousands of years. So, I mean, if they were talking about these beings hundreds of thousands of years ago, what doesn't make us think that they could still be alive today? I mean, if they were seeing these things so long ago, I still think that maybe the same creatures they saw are the ones that people are seeing today. I mean, it has to be some sort of being. Like, it's so hard to think that it couldn't be like a flesh and blood animal. But then again, you never know. It could be extraterrestrial. It could be a flesh and blood creature. It could be a small population of previously extinct species or an evolved species. You never know. That's the crazy thing about it.
When you think of it also too, into each like country, they have like their own different Bigfoots, and take into consideration that even in the U.S. we have a couple different variations of Bigfoots. We'll get back to that in a second, but like in South America, you have different types of Bigfoots, and even in Asia and Australia. So you have all of these different countries with different variations. So do you all think that all stems from their own spirits or variation of origin, or do you think that's totally just like also too with your previous answer of what Bigfoot could be?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it really could be, because I mean, they can all be connected in some way. They could be subspecies. I mean, they could all be from the same sort of family that we have not even discovered yet, really. Like the orangutan in Asia. I spoke when I was doing my blog for a little bit. I started that after I had my medical issue last year, and that was a whole mess of things. But I spoke with Cliff, who was from Finding Bigfoot. He studies about the orangutan a lot. He's done numerous studies on that, and just from his point of view, he truly believes that there very well could be different species and families of these creatures in each part of the continent, and you never really know if they could be related or just have the same characteristics, or they evolved from the same creatures. Or I mean, even like the land bridge millions of years ago, you never know if something could have came over from Asia and just started living. Really, that's just the crazy thing about it. There's so many different stories. It's just hard to think that they can't be related in some way.
I agree. I do think that there is some sort of connection. On top of that, going back to the U.S., how many types of Bigfoot do you think we have running around in the U.S.? And what I mean by types, like how many do you think we have in variants?
Well, with like say the swamp ape in Florida, uh, Boggy Creek monster, Falk monster, Momo, Missouri. Jeez, what were some other ones?
The Gugway.
Yep, that I always forget that name too. It drives me nuts. There's so many different names for these things. So I mean, maybe they could be different subspecies, because when you hear about the descriptions of some of these different creatures with different names, the descriptions are quite different from others. that you hear. Like up north, you hear a lot different than down south. Like with the swamp ape versus Sasquatch up north, and they seem a little bit smaller down south, and up here they seem larger, and like different hair colors, stances, body posture, features, and that makes me think that maybe there is subspecies or completely different species of these like animals. I wouldn't call them primates because you never really know, but I mean these beings. I mean it's just fantasy. Like if I was really that one always gets me because it always baffles me because I'm just like, all right, they say these things look like this down in Florida. They say these things look like this up in Washington, Oregon. They say these things look like this in Missouri and Louisiana and the swamps and up in the Northeast. And it's hard for me to not think that they couldn't all be related. Like I do believe that there is some sort of relation between these creatures, whether it be a subspecies or they could be just the same species that have evolved to their areas. I mean, there could be numerous reasons for these things.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I mean, if Sasquatch is an ape, and I'm saying if, it's a big if, it would only make sense that there's different kinds. I mean, look at the ape family itself. You got gorillas, chimpanzees, baboons, orangutans.
They all come in different sizes and features and colors, and like I said with the birds, they come in a variety.
Exactly.
And they discover primates every few years. They've discovered more and more primates, like South America, Africa, and the Congo, and the Amazon. They've discovered more and more species. Like we discover new species every year.
Well, it's interesting to note too that they actually found out just recently that primates actually started here. We thought before that they started in Asia, but they discovered older remains here in the States.
Exactly.
So,
and then that's the fascinating thing. And like I said, like before with like the land bridge, millions of years ago, I mean, some of those animals could have made their way across into Asia. They could have made their way into South America. They could have made their way into Africa. I mean, at one time, all the continents were together. So I mean, that could very well be how all of these animals made their way into these different areas and made their own.
Yeah, it goes back to adaptation.
Exactly. Adaptation was a huge part in that, really. And it still is.
Oh, yeah. Adaptation is what causes species to survive.
Exactly. If you don't have adaptation, you don't have species survival.
Right. We're always adapting all the time. Humans.
We have to adapt every single day, especially right now with all the craziness going on in the world.
Spot on.
Everybody has had to adapt to everything going on. And it's hectic. Like me, I work in the healthcare field. It's hectic.
Oof.
Like I worry every day. Like with my client, I worry every day that something may happen. It's a scary thing. And my son, I have a 1-year-old son. Like I always get terrified that if he got sick. Like it's a scary thought, but I mean we have to adapt. Like with the whole mask thing, the social distancing. I mean, people have their opinions on it, and I don't bash opinions whatsoever. I respect everybody's opinions because everybody's entitled to them.
True.
100%. But me, like, I do it just to keep my family safe. I keep my client safe, because I wouldn't want to spread things to them and harm them in any way.
Right.
That's just the kind of person I am. I mean, I'm a family man, so they come first. But I mean, just adaptation is a huge part of society and huge part of life. And if you didn't have that, the world will be a complete mess.
Right.
Transitioning into dogmen. Dogmen are perhaps our most hot topic, most well-known cryptid as of right now for many. Do you think that dogmen are all these evil, hyped up monsters that are put out on various platforms, or do you think that these creatures are no different than our typical Bigfoots with good and bad, like each personality?
Yeah, I think that, I don't think they're these evil creatures that are out to get every single person they see. I believe that, they're a part of this world. You know, they're not looking to just to kill. They could be defensive, like any other species could be. And there's a lot to them that could be similar to Sasquatch. They're both mysterious in a way. I mean, and with wolves, wolves, there's been a huge adaptations with them, like the dire wolf that went extinct millions of years ago. I mean, could there be a surviving descendants that have adapted to or evolved to these creatures that we're seeing? Or is it a new species that we have yet to discover? I mean, there's just so much mystery to it. But again, that's what makes it fascinating.
I agree. And on top of that, do you have an opinion on the LBL incident that occurred, reportedly of a supposed dogman or something that had murdered a family and also campers in the area? But do you have an opinion on anything in reference to that?
I haven't heard too much. I mean, I've heard a little bit of it, but something had to have happened. I can't say that it was a dog man. I can't say that it wasn't a bear or some sort of other apex predator in the area, or it could have been a human. I mean, you have there's people now in the world that are just pure evil. That's it. It's everywhere. But I mean, could they have the power to do that? I think so. Do they have the capabilities of it? I absolutely believe so. But to just kill everything in its sight is pretty gruesome. But that definitely makes people kind of learn, you got to keep caution when you're out in the field. You really you can't take these things lightly because you never know what these animals can do. You don't know what kind of power they have. They could wipe you. You could be the biggest man on the face of the earth, and they could still take you out. You never know.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why I bring it up is because we often hear some reports too of dogmen attacks, and one thing I wanted to ask you was, do you feel that with dogmen that these creatures just do not want to be bothered? That's why they retaliate. That's why they go after human beings. There's something more about them that that they're incompatible towards Sasquatch, that they are just too sensitive or something protective of their land.
Oh, I do believe that because a lot of animals do that now. Like bears, they do not like conflict with humans, especially if it's a mother with cubs. I have had a run with a mother with cubs, and it is you do not want to be in between them, and it's a sight. They will defend them with all they got, and whether it's just a mock charge or like a bluff, which luckily happened to me, and I made my way out very quickly, or they're just very defensive. They could be very territorial, which a lot of animals nowadays are. Especially, like I said, bears, wolves, mountain lions, tigers, lions, they're all territorial. So these beings could very well just be very, very territorial of their areas and be very protective. And if you step into their territory and you are not wanted, they will make that known.
Do you think that the cryptids play a large role in a lot of the missing 411 reports?
Well, that's always an interesting one. I think that a lot of the missing 411 cases, there actually have been numerous sightings in a lot of those areas I've read, and I wouldn't really put it out. I wouldn't doubt it, really. I mean, could some other things have happened possibly? Could it have another animal like a mountain lion or a bear or something happen to these hikers or missing people? But then again, it's also in the back of your head, like, what if they encountered something that we don't even, or they didn't even think of? Like, what if they came across one of these creatures and they could have been very territorial and they did something about it? And it's that's the crazy part. I mean, they could have just where they could have been very well just minding their own business, but unexpectedly came upon one of these creatures. They could have been very territorial, very angry, and it saw them as a threat and took the threat out.
And would you think that'd be the same response towards the Dyatlov Pass incident in the early 50s?
Ooh, yeah. Uh, I think that would probably be up there too, for sure. I do believe that these creatures could definitely be very, very territorial and very, very dangerous if provoked. And if you're in their element where they have the upper hand, I think that's definitely a recipe for disaster for sure. If you catch them in the wrong areas.
I have to agree with that. Shifting into a different type of cryptid, talk about the Gugwe. The Gugwe, what would you think your initial thoughts would be on that creature? Do you think that's one of the more tougher blended Bigfoots out there as described from some who try to compare it between the two, or do you think that is a pretty intimidating, dominating type creature in a sense?
It's definitely a tough one to kind of wrap around, but from what I've heard of this creature, it does sound very, very intimidating, and I definitely would not want to be on the receiving end of one. 100%, I would not want to be anywhere in the vicinity because from what I've heard, it just sounds very, very intimidating and something that you do not want to run into, and definitely keep your distance from. But it also is very fascinating at the same time.
Would you think Gugwe could be covered up Bigfoot type reports that people see when they encounter them?
I think that some reports, yeah, I think they could be seeing that absolutely.
Do you think that there's a possible other explanation for what Dogman could be? Like, for example, I may as well, even if I asked you, what do you think a Dogman is? Let me ask you that.
My personal opinion is I believe it is an undiscovered species of possible wolf, or it could be an evolved or like a descendant of like say like the dire wolf. Those were massive, and what if descendants of these animals survived and just evolved into these massive creatures? Even though there may not be a massive population, there's still millions and millions of acres of land in this country for them to roam and go undetected. But I mean, I think that it could very well be an undiscovered species or evolved species of a previously extinct.
I agree with that.
So, one of my other questions, and even though that this is a controversial one, we talked about Bigfoot evidence, we talked about Patty Gilman, when we talk about some of the Dogman evidence out there, a lot of our Dogman evidence isn't really present because it's either been debunked or it is hard to determine. Do you have an initial thought on the Beast of Seven Shoots? Have you seen that photograph?
Ooh, I feel like I have, but I'm not 100% on that one. The name does sound familiar, though.
It's an image involving a creature that is photographed on the lower right-hand side of a particular trail of a Quebec park. And
Okay. I do believe I actually do believe I actually have seen that. I've seen that float around here and there. Yes, I have actually.
do you believe it could be perhaps a Dogman, or perhaps maybe it was a some sort of Gugwe or Bigfoot-like creature sighted in that photo?
Honestly, from what I've seen of it, I would probably lean towards Gugwe just from the angle of the photo. But I mean, you never know. That's where the mystery and the controversy comes in. Is you don't really know, and that's where opinions come in, and everybody's gonna have one. And like I said, I absolutely respect every single opinion I hear, even if it's not the same as mine or yours or anybody's. I mean, I always love hearing people's opinions about it.
So then let's transition to a particular film. In 2010, there was a reveal of an infamous film called the Gable film. It was reported to be a hoax thanks to the History Channel show Monster Quest. Various researchers, including Linda Godfrey, were present in the debunking of this particular video. Do you have an initial thought on the Gable film? Do you believe that it could be perhaps maybe more to it that is covered up, or it is based on an actual dogman attack on film, but this is just a reenactment of some sense?
I definitely believe there was probably a hoax to it because, in my opinion, with a lot of dogman sightings and encounters that I've heard, a lot of the times you don't really see them out in the open. They're kind of in the shadows, and they try not to be seen, from what I've heard a lot. And in that video, just the creature is just in the wide open field, and then just all of a sudden just charges at the cameraman, whoever was filming that. And it's hard for me to believe that a creature of that size and capability would just be sitting there in an open field where anything could see it. Because I feel like these animals are very reclusive and very what's the word? Yeah, I'd say reclusive is probably the best word for that. And it was hard for me to put those two together with that film.
Well, transitioning away into some other topics, cryptids as a whole, what would be your mark in the cryptid field? What would you like to do? What would be your legacy, I guess? Someone who's starting out, trying to get an idea. What do you want to accomplish?
I'm still in the learning phase for sure. I try to learn as much as I can every day, watch as much as I can. Like I said, I listen to your show. I listen to Sasquatch Chronicles, The Confessionals, Bigfoot Quest. I respect all those guys. I respect you guys, and I love listening to eyewitness encounters, kind of getting an idea of what people have seen and like where they've been seen. And I think just learning more about these creatures and kind of getting an understanding for them, and even helping people who have had encounters come out and share them without feeling like they're going to be ridiculed, give them an open platform so they can share those.
Right.
I think that's where I'd want to be, is, just being able to help people come out and share their stories and their encounters and kind of get that closure and get that relief off their shoulders,
I agree. But hey, Devin, before we start wrapping some things up, I want to say thanks again for taking the time out of your schedule to do the show. But before you do leave tonight, I do want to also plug in your show. I think you have something nice and very creative coming about. And can you please tell us and the audience what this show is and what you're doing?
Well, no, thank you guys too. I really appreciate that, because I think it's a huge help for me. I respect you guys. I love The Fringe. That's one of my daily listens when I'm at work every day. It gets me through the day.
Thank you.
Without driving myself crazy. And with the Cryptid Diaries, the show's called the Cryptid Diaries podcast. And basically, I wanted to start this, about a year ago. I had the idea of making a podcast because I've been listening to your guys' show, a bunch of other shows for a long time, and I think that'd be very fun to do. And I had some medical stuff come up that kind of pushed it off. And then I began my blog, which I had a lot of success with. I had a lot of fun with, and met a lot of great people. And then I finally got the opportunity to finally start the podcast. And my biggest goal for it is to, give people a platform to share their stories, their encounters, their thoughts, their opinions on these beings, on these creatures, and not feel judged or called crazy, or feel like they're going to just be looked down upon, or, just those fears of, being looked at wrong, and just feel like they can share those things to other people and have people understand where they're coming from, how they feel, like the pure terror that they must have felt from these things, and just kind of give them a platform to, get that weight off their shoulders and feel like, okay, I finally got my story out. I can relax now knowing that it's out, and I can be at ease with this.
Oh, absolutely. I like that theme and concept. It's very similar to what we all practice here at the Fringe. And Devin, I wish you the best of luck with it. Please always, you're more than welcome to send a message, reach out to me if you need any help. Be glad to help you with your podcast as well. And, I wish you all the best with it.
I really appreciate that, guys, and that really means a lot to me. It's been a hectic year, but it's starting to look up. It really is, and I really appreciate you guys.
Appreciate you as well, and yes, I agree. Well, with that being said, Devin, thank you for coming on the Venomous Fringe.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Take it easy, man.
I want to thank Devin once more for coming on the Venomous Fringe. I think Devin's a great talent. I like his idea of the Cryptid Diaries podcast, and I hope, Devin, my big words to you like I did throughout this interview, I hope your podcast goes strong. I hope that you meet the right people, and I hope that you deliver and direct the best you can. I think you're a very young, brilliant mind. You would explain to me something that you love and your passion for, privately, and go for it, my guy. I think you deserve this. I think this is something that you need. As much as I said it to myself 3 to 4 years ago, passing it from another, you guys are great. So Devin, I wish you the best of luck. And before we conclude tonight's episode, because this is, of course, the penultimate episode before our finale, I would like to go ahead and make out some honorable mentions once more. You see, when I had done that previous upload, my last upload, I left out a few names of people who have been also very dear to the channel, and I do strongly apologize. It wasn't done on purpose. I'd like to clarify this because I understand it was a bit controversial. I would like to clarify that I completely improvised and forgot, so I do apologize if this offended you. It wasn't done out of spite. It was totally an accident, and that's the beauty. When you improvise, you don't have a script in front of you. You literally just say what's off your head, and that's what I did. But now, because of the actions that have been said, I will gladly throw an apology out there, and on top of that, throw that honorable mention. To Robert Molden, who has been a moderator for me for quite some time, I want to thank you again for watching the chat, along with the other amazing moderators that have done before, from Julie, Second Star, to Ethan, to Titan. And I want to thank you guys for that. Robert, thank you. Long Beach Werewolf, same goes for you. You did a fantastic job as well. Whispers TV, I haven't heard from you, Whispers, but I hope you're okay. And I want to thank you again for your amazing support and your love. Whispers, I want you to know that despite us closing out this chapter with the show, you've always been a phenomenal person, and I want to thank you for your kind words. And last but not least, but perhaps also too much like Whispers, and one of our best sponsors and supporters, none other than Venomous Vixen. Vixen, I want to thank you again for your long period of time in direction and moderating, as well as promotion, and your love for this show. I think you guys were great. And yes, while this concludes, this doesn't mean it's the end for me and Ryan. There's other things aboard. And while it won't be cryptid related, you'll just have to find out down the road. But also, too, folks, as this is the penultimate show, our finale will begin where it all started, with the discussion of Dogman. Our series finale, I'll be interviewing an eyewitness who had a report and has seen multiple, from Bigfoot to Dogman, Goatman, to Skinwalkers and Wendigo, and a little bit of paranormal. So he's got a lot of things on his plate, and we'll be interviewing this individual on our last episode. So ladies and gentlemen, buckle up. Thank you again. We will see you all at the end of the week with the series finale of the Venomous Fringe.